Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I am wanting to do another podcast for the endurance athlete, how to best fuel, train, and perform your best if you want to burn fat, improve performance, and hopefully you want to improve the aging process, training for your future self, as I say in every episode. So, today we're going to go through some articles I've been putting together so I can go through them in my blog post and then some other articles and just kind of discuss and be open-minded to n equals 1 and really taking this information and applying it to our own lives. So let me share the screen and we can dive into these topics. So head to debbiepotts.net to find this blog and learn more. Okay, so here we go. What is the best plan for the endurance athlete? So if you are doing endurance events, the recommendations out there for nutrition, nutritional ketosis, fat adapted athlete, metabolically flexible athlete is going to be slightly different. And if you are doing more high intensity interval training, more anaerobic workouts, which means more muscle glycogen depleting workouts, the fueling plan will be different as well. And then if you are peri or premenopausal female athlete, your nutrition and training plan is going to look a lot different than a male athlete and also anybody else, because unless you're following the same cycle plan as somebody else, you're gonna be a little different. So each week of the month, your hormone cycles can help dictate what your fueling, fasting, and performance schedule should look like. So let's go through some articles and you can send me your thoughts, what you think. So some good articles. I was trying to find low carb, keto, carnivore, real food, because I don't like, as you know, probably by now, if you've listened to me for a while, the word keto, carnivore, paleo, anything. It's the main diet for you, the endurance athlete, the fat adapted athlete, the person that wants to be fit and healthy from the inside out, should be the food plan that helps you balance your blood sugar. So all this information out there is just, your fat metabolism should be your primary engine, backup fuel tank, carb metabolism. So you need to be metabolically flexible. But it depends on you, the individual, where you are in your health and your journey. And if you are a fat adapted athlete, you need to start there. If you're not, we've got a little prep work to do. So keto for endurance training. If you know my book, it's not even in here anymore. It's all worn out. Volek and Finney, they're the ones that first introduced the low carb performance manual for the fat adapted athlete years ago. Stephen Finney, who started way back in 1980, being a researcher in keto and endurance athletes. And he tested 6 obese people on a treadmill, normal carb containing diet, and then a protein supplemented fast as a ketogenic low calorie diet. And the results over 6 weeks of keto adapting time frame, participants could stay on the treadmill twice as long before becoming exhausted, the people that were doing more of a keto diet. Now, Finney followed the study with another research study in 1983 on cyclists. And after 4 weeks of a fat adapting these athletes, the cyclists burned more fat without any impairments in VO2 max. So since then, there's been a lot more. Obviously, it's been a long time since the 80s, as we're just starting 2023 soon here. The more evidence has emerged suggesting keto is compatible with endurance training. Because think back to our many videos, interviews, podcasts over the past 10 years, endurance sports is primarily a fat burning sport, right? We're going long duration, doing a 50K, 100K trail run or run, you're doing marathon, you're doing Ironman, we're going long. So we need those slow burning logs as fat metabolism and not dependent on carb metabolism where you have to eat all the time because you're going to be burning through the glycogen stores quickly. So the research has been evolving over the years for keto fat adapted athlete. This article also says for endurance training, after 2 weeks of high fat dieting training cyclists improve time to exhaustion during moderate intensity exercise. Ultra endurance runners have also done keto diet, been successful burning more body fat during long endurance events. And these studies show the main benefits of keto adaptation or fat adaptation are increased fat burning and increased time to fatigue. This makes sense as the fat fuel tank is much bigger and you can exert yourself for longer when keto fueled. Now, I'll add to this article that we have to remember it's how you train and how you eat, but also manage your stressors to be a fat adapted athlete. But training low, doing that maffetone, max aerobic function heart rate training for 80% of your workouts or more if you're just starting. And then when appropriate, you add in speed work that's going hard, 20, 30-second sprint, especially if you're peri or postmenopausal women. We want to do more 20, 30-second sprints and do more anaerobic work 20% of the time once we have become fat adapted and built that base, being metabolically efficient athlete. So it's, using that fuel tank, how you train, but it's also how you eat. And remember, every stress response is a blood sugar response. And I was insulin resistant and had gained 30 pounds when I was racing because of my chronic stress external. And then that leads to a zillion internal hidden stressors because I was living life as a race. So that is right. I wrote my book, Life is on a Race, to share what happened to me almost 10 years ago, 2013, March is I'm coming up to my anniversary of when this journey started for me. Okay, let's continue on with my investigation here. Another article, recovering from exercise. Is keto helpful for recovering without doing excessive carbs or carbing up? So this article talks about lactate. So during exercise, I'm reading this, but I'll add in my own here there, that you can be compound called lactate, or as you hear, lactic acid. After exercise, there's extra lactate is cleared by the liver. Harder and longer efforts can cause lactate to accumulate faster than it is cleared. And so there's more that lactate accumulates, recovery is impaired. So how does keto have anything to do with this or being a fat adapted athlete? In 2014, which is 9 years ago, almost 1 month of keto dieting raised lactate threshold in cyclists. In other words, they would clear lactate more significantly or more efficiently at higher intensities. And another study, endurance athletes in ketosis had a lower lactate concentration after exercise than carb-fed athletes. This suggests better recovery. And I would have to go back and say, were these studies done on females? Because until recently, and still it's very limited research is done on female athletes. So I would say this information is for the male athlete. Now, glycogen, how can that help? Well, keto or fat adapting doesn't mean you're zero carbs for energy. As I've talked about in many recent episodes this year, harder and longer exercise always demands some glucose. So we talk in other videos, I talked about training low, racing high, and talked to, looking at Dr. Dan Plews and what I learned in their Endure IQ program and from Ben Greenfield is training low carbs, not doing a lot of calories, more glycogen depleting, but it's also, I'm training low heart rate. So I'm teaching my body to burn more fat and stay away from burning those carbs until needed. And then there's people who are training higher heart rate. They're still going to be using fat and carbohydrates. So it depends on your intensity and duration. I know when I go bike ride, long ride, 3-4 hours, there's some pickups in there. There's some steep hill climbs that my heart rate's going to go up to 150, 160, burning more carbs. So it depends, as the answer always is, what your workout is, what the duration, what the intensity. So using your heart rate will help you out as well as get a metabolic efficiency test. So back to the article. Fat adapted athlete, the balance shifts away from carbs and towards fat. So muscle glycogen is where our carbs are stored. So think of that as your suitcases, your muscle glycogen storage in your liver, and your muscles is only about 2,000 calories. So this article is saying the more glycogen is depleted during exercise, the more fatigue sets in. So of course, if we reduce the need for glucose, keto fat adapted athletes may reduce the need for glycogen, allowing the keto / fat adapted athlete to preserve their carb tank and ward off fatigue. So that again looks at training low, racing high, and how you're training, how you're fueling. That's another conversation. All right, next part of the article, keto for endurance exercise, the bottom line. If enough time, keto adaptation time, which I'll say a lot of the research studies, if you look at their study, what the population was done, but how long that they did a keto adapted time frame for them coming from a high carb diet, often it's very short. So sometimes you have to remember it could take 4 to 6 weeks to keto adapt. And that's what this article says here later on. Multiple studies show improvements in fat burning and time to exhaustion after people follow keto plan. That keto enhances all aspects of endurance performance, depending on what metric you look at, might not. So endurance allow 4 to 6 weeks to be fat adapted on a low carb diet. Side note, if you go back to my videos with Dr. Dan Plews and Your IQ phases, I talk about their cold keto phase and how it takes 4 phases to figure out your sweet spot with your carbs. So we go low and then bring them back in and find that fat adaptation process. So listening to your body, everyone wants to feel their best when you're training and when you're in this fat adaptation process. And again, go back to my whole video on that. But, carb cycling, exercise logging, they suggest here, the carb managers, they have a good guide to exercise on keto, and they have a cyclical ketogenic diet article too, I mentioned later on. So how you train and how you fuel, it's a lot to that person. And the female athlete, when we're doing fat adaptation process, remember we're timing that cold keto week or 2 weeks based on your menstrual cycle. So it's going to be a little different. So go back and look at that video. All right. So how do you know if you're fat adapted? How do you fuel your endurance exercise? Another article talks about the power muscle contraction during exercise using energy. So this is talking about more how it works to be fat fueled athlete. So we take energy and create ATP, right? ATP is usable energy. To make ATP, your body primarily uses carbohydrates or fats. So how do we know which fuel we're going to burn? That's where we test metabolic efficiency tests on a treadmill, bike, at rest, and figure out what your main fuel source is and what heart rate and speed you're at if you're doing an exercise test when you switch over to mainly carbohydrates. We call that metabolic crossover point. So on this article, they're talking about the availability of carbs. So when carbs are available, your body prefers to use carbs, glucose, to make ATP. When they are not available, you teach your body to shift from using carbs to using fat for energy. Since carbs are lower, not zero carbs, remember, they might be lower than the traditional diet, say 300, 400, 500 grams of carbs versus fat adapted ketogenic athlete might be 100 to 130 grams around there per day of carbohydrates. Some people can tolerate up to 200 grams of carbs and still stay showing nutritional ketosis or fat adaptation. So since carbs are lower, it triggers a shift to fat for fuel. Not only does this get you burning more fat, but it helps you have a massive fuel reserve that was not available. So was it Dr. Ben Bickman or, forget the name of the one on fasting, but how your fat is like the freezer. You have to work harder to go get it, and your carbs are refrigerator. So if to teach your body to go out to the freezer and get that food, it takes a little bit longer. So you have to work on that fat metabolism rather than it's easy to grab those carbohydrates in your fridge that's in the house and walking out to the garage. So it's always a good analogy. But all right. So keto adapting or fat adapted refers to the shift from carbs to fat as your primary energy source. Based on available energy or evidence, keto I hate the word keto adapting. Fat adapted may take you anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks, as I mentioned earlier, depending on your, see, remember your unique individual, your metabolism. So exercise for endurance athletes, you're going longer, remember. So ultra endurance events as marathons, long swims, Ironman, trail running, we don't need to constantly be carb refueling. But traditionally, these athletes are just overloading on carbs every hour and then having GI stress and flunking, running to the bathroom, having all sorts of problems. So remember, your body can only store a limited amount of carbs. So they say in this article, 500 grams of the glycogen in muscle and liver cells, that's about 2,000 calories of energy. So 2,000 calories doesn't get you through a marathon. That's why ultra endurance athletes drink that sugary goop and they need extra energy, but then you're also going to have all those side effects. So when you are a fat adapted athlete, you can be burning more fat fuels. Fat has 20 times more calories than glycogen. And so they're saying summaries, we've talked from Dr. Volek and Finney's book, the carb fuel tank is about 2,000 calories, or over on the other side, you've got, say, 40,000 plus calories of stored fat fuel. And this is what I learned, gosh, 2005, I started doing metabolic efficiency testing. So 15 plus years ago, I started learning about this fat fueled athlete versus a carb fueled athlete, that we want to tap into all that energy stored in our body ready for us, but we need to switch from our old mindset that we need to have a bagel, orange, and a banana before we work out. Instead, we can stay fat burning and having some, well, I do coffee with some collagen peptides and some MCT oil and some mushroom adaptogens and heavy cream, and I can go for a while. So again, looking at your stress levels is important for athlete. I look on digestion, making sure you're eating mindfully, not mindlessly. So all of this changes if you have chronic stress, as well as hidden internal sources of stress, as we test your microbiome with the GI map, Dutch hormone panel, blood chemistry tests, and organic acids test to really know what's going on inside that can be causing you inflammation and weight loss stalls. So more information on what is keto adaptation or fat adaptation, you can look at Dr. Steve Finney's information. He speaks a lot, Low Carb USA and Low Carb Denver. I know that he speaks, and you can find his videos on YouTube, but he is just the master who taught a lot of this to me, reading his book years ago with Volek. So Volek and Finney, check that out. If you have not already read their book, you must read it. It's very easy, short read. So most people keeping carbs around 5 to 10% of daily calories. That would be the rest of fat and protein. As we know nowadays, we don't do what people used to say for keto, being super high fat and little protein, that we really, as aging athletes, want to prioritize protein and match that or adjust that based on your genetics and ancestry background and digestion with your fat. So I'm not into eating 70-80% of fat. I think we really need to focus on protein. And I look at Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, her ideal body weight in grams of protein, and then spreading out your protein 30-50 grams throughout the day, and then figure out fat goes with that naturally if you're eating nutrient dense real food and getting fattier cuts of meat, and make sure it's grass fed, not toxic meat. All right, just a lot of talking. So why must carbs be limited to fat adapt? Because high intakes of carbohydrates raise blood sugar and insulin levels. High circulating insulin prevents breakdown of body fat. Insulin is a fat storage hormone, not fat burning. So insulin's up, you are burning fat. So insulin's up, ketones are down. So when you limit carbohydrates, insulin levels fall. And this is also why fasting is so beneficial. But then we have to look at being mindful of too low carb, too much fasting, because you are an athlete, those numbers will be different, the duration and days of the month for the female when it's appropriate. So when you limit carbs, insulin levels fall. This means we need to look for energy elsewhere. So your body starts to tap into fat metabolism, basically, sum it up. but your body can store way more energy in fat cells, triglycerides, than you can glycogen in your stored form of carbs. So again, going back to that 2,000 calories stored in glycogen versus the 40,000 calories, that's a big difference. So just to review this article section I copied here, I think it's important to look at high intakes of carbs. I think nowadays people, I don't know what year this article is, but it's finding what Rob Wolf speaks about and Jay Feldman. Once you are fat adapted, so 4 to 6 weeks, listen to my podcasts and my videos. I've got it like 3 or 4 of them on how to become fat adapted. And then you get to the last phase where you are adjusting. And that's where we talk about carb timing. Now, the summary of what type of carbs is really important to look at. Nutrient dense, real food sources, nature's carbs, as Dr. Mindy says, as well as what I'm saying is not all carbs are equal. Don't think I can time my carbs post anaerobic workout or my evening meal to fuel my morning fasted workout. That's going to be little anaerobic intervals by eating processed foods, and especially wheat, gluten, vegetable oils. That's a no-no. So if you're into your health and being a fit and healthy athlete from inside out, look at what you're eating. You need some carbohydrates, say 100 grams a day. When you're doing a fat adaptation, you go cold keto, it's 50 grams for 2 weeks. But then we bring it back up to find your sweet spot, 100 to 200 grams, depending on the athlete, depending on the female cycle and more. So it doesn't mean zero carbs. So what type of carbs? So this article now says, do you need carbs for exercise? So exercise, known as glycolytic, demands more glucose. So if you are not fat adapted, eating carbs may enhance performance during these exercises. Does this mean you can't exercise on keto? No. So then we look at doing cyclical ketogenic diet or targeted ketogenic diet. And there's information in this Carb Manager article on Guide to Keto Exercise you can look up. But before experimenting with carbs, the article says, become fat adapted at least 4 weeks. So I say 4 to 6 weeks. Fat adapting should help you fuel all types of exercise, not just low intensity in the fat burning zone, which is now everyone's calling zone 1, zone 2 workout, or what we've said for 15, 20 years, the maffetone max aerobic function heart rate, 180 minus your age plus minus 5 beats. So if you are, depending on the intensity of workout, if you need carbs or not. So here's more information. People that perform better being a fat adapted athlete, Dr. Steve Finney, you can look at his research, but athletic performance, you have to figure out when you need to add in some carbs or maybe certain fuel. So another separate episode. Okay, another article talking about exercising while you're fat adapt in your phase. Exercise type of exercise we talk about, that zone 1, 2, that low intensity sustained cardio. If you're doing that 1-2 times a week, an hour and a half, fasted heart rate, low heart rate exercise, morning exercise, that's like 30-45 minutes. You can do this without needing to eat anything if you ate 12 to 15 hours before. Easy strength training is also a way you can fuel being a low carb athlete. Focus on high rep, low weight resistance, they say, like body weight, push-ups, lunges, squats, planks. But keeping it light helps you stay in the anaerobic glucose demanding zone. So this is suggested when you are becoming fat adapted. So that 4 to 6 weeks, this is how you exercise. So the low intensity, easy strength training, balance, flexibility, stability. And then we switch it up when you are fat adapted. And then we add in heavy weights, 3 to 6 reps, add some intervals, and we can teach the body how to metabolize fat and then when to kick in carb metabolism. So there's more information on this blog page that I put together. Is a ketogenic diet ideal for the endurance athlete? So carb cycling, if you look at cyclical keto diet, when you follow CKD diet, you eat a high carb 1 to 2 non-consecutive days per week. Others say you can do a standard keto diet where you're very low carb, 55 to 75% of your fat, 20, 30% from protein, and less than 10% of carbs. I think that is too low carbs if a female is in luteal phase. The luteal phase for females athletes, you do not want to be in ketosis. So that's when you come out of ketosis, and listen to Dr. Mindy Pelz on that. But keeping carbs too low suppresses the hormone and activates hormone kisspeptin, and your body thinks it's under stress. So you got to be careful with these guidelines on these articles that you're not going too low and not looking at you, the unique individual. That's why you want to work with the coach to figure out what is best for you and experiment, because it's going to vary based on your day, your stress, your fasting windows, your travel schedule, your workouts. So you can play with cyclical ketogenic diet, changing your macros on high carb days. Maybe you're doing that on a higher workout day, like a long bike ride day. And I try to think doing a 5-1-1, that you're doing 5 days low carb, and then you're going higher carb maybe on a Saturday, and not really worrying about it. Just keep eating real food, but don't be so anal about what you're eating. Just eat real food and be more intuitive. So check this out, how to get started, a CK diet, and look on carbmanager.com. They also have an article on what you should eat before, during, and after workouts, trying to put together. And, you know, I think I'll just need to mention here, the body, we really want to work on post-workout for an athlete. I think it's important because you were endurance athletes, you're going longer. You raise cortisol in your workouts and you're being more catabolic. So we want to really use, I think S Fuels is amazing for your fuel during your workout because it has glutamine in it, and that helps with our gut wall lining. And post-workout, I really suggest looking at a higher amount of protein powder with the leucine in it for protein synthesis, and having glutamine and colostrum. So Paleo Valley and Keon and Equip and Keto, everyone's coming out with colostrum, creatine, whey protein, and having it alternative, if you can't do whey, is beef protein, and it doesn't taste gross. So getting unsweetened, I think, is best, and adding nut butter instead to add flavor than a stevia, I think, is not so great anymore. So lots of information. I won't go into in here about how to build your optimum recovery, how to eat after a workout, looking at your macros. So I was just trying to check this all out, but getting protein in and getting a healthy source of carbs, like some sweet potatoes, safe starches, like cooked and cooled potatoes, having your fermented vegetables, looking at good prebiotic and probiotic foods is what I would look at eating more of. So that is blog post. I also wanted to share with you ketogains.com. This is back in 2015, but he wrote a summary of Vulcan Finney's book. So looking at how low carb diets are anti-inflammatory, how they produce less oxidative stress during exercise, more rapid recovery between exercise sessions, much less dependence on muscle glycogen, less need to reload with carbohydrates during and after exercise, low carb adaptations, accelerates the use of saturated fats for fuel, allowing higher intake of total fats without risk, and helps reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. Gut and immune functions are better maintained. So lots of information in Vulcan Finney's book. I suggested for many years, I've said that the human body composition will be obviously improved. 400, 500 grams of glycogen in your body, 1,600 to 2,000 calories, and practically unlimited fat stores. So if you look at 10 kilograms when you're very lean, 90,000 calories is a lot. And well-trained athletes' muscle cells can store much energy in fat droplets as they can store as glycogen. So that's in the book of Vulcan Finney, low carb athlete. Exercising, talking about, getting hydration, and often, I'm sure they say something about sea salt, but exercise increases production of oxygen-free radicals, and they want to look at that, and protein sparing. They talk about all sorts of stuff. So I won't go into that, but you can look up ketogains.com, The Art and Science of Low Carb Performance by Jeff Bullock and Steve Finney. Summary is on there, so I'll try to link that in the show notes. And also another article Keto Gains wrote on low carb performance. So Jim Rode can work a rational view, but information on how the human body utilizes high energy molecule to manage every kind of necessity of metabolism, ATP, and goes into that during resting. ATP is stored in little quantities in the cells. Stored ATP is enough to deal with around 5 seconds of effort. So the first 2 or 3 reps of heavy squats. After that, ADP, a byproduct obtained by breaking the 3rd phosphate bond, can readily reconvert into ATP. Let's get sciencey, by getting back to the phosphate groups to create creatine, a group from creatine phosphate. And this metabolic pathway, ATP/CP, can sustain 10 to 20 seconds of strenuous physical activity. After that, the cell must switch over to anaerobic glycolysis using glycogen and glucose for producing ATP, releasing lactic acid as byproduct. So it goes on, but it just, example, you can read this article, but how to match your fueling with your training depends on the workout. So if you're just doing, 5 repetitions, you have enough stored ATP. 5 seconds of efforts are in there, 2 to 3 repetitions, heavy squats. So pre-workout for strength, I have new creatine from Cynthia Thurlow I'm in love with, easily dissolves in my coffee, and I can have some essential amino acids. If you could drink that in your water with some element unsweetened, I think it would be a great stack. And then you can do some peptides, collagen peptides in your coffee as well. So anyways, this is a cool article. It's back 2017 from Keto Gains, but just goes into the science of training and fueling for the low carb athlete when it is necessary to add some carbohydrates. So looking at different research here, looking at endurance athletes as Timothy Olson and Zach Bitter. So it goes on and on and on, but talks about the Cori cycle to resynthesize muscle glycogen and how that works. And anyway, so it's a great article you can dive into, and their targeted ketogenic diet protocol makes it possible to reestablish nutritional ketosis in an hour from the end of a workout session when the insulin levels return to baseline. So you got to look at with or without pre-workout carbohydrates, your insulin levels still drop down when you are a fat adapted athlete and doing targeted ketogenic diet. So you can look up their pre-workout Keto Gains coffee or shake you can do. I've talked about that before. So check out Keto Gains and LMNT and Carb Mandry, can get lots of information, but Keto Gains has a whole article on their targeted ketogenic diet. Again, the focus is to avoid breaking down our muscle and our gut health and improve recovery, repair, and longevity. So getting enough of the right foods pre-workout, and we want to stimulate protein synthesis and get enough fuel so we improve performance, and not doing too much fasted workouts if it's more intense. Sometimes you will see more benefits if you do have a little calories as a Keto Gains drink. So you can check out more of the science depending on the workouts on the Keto Gains TKD targeted ketogenic diet protocol article, and how you can increase a greater protein gain and not get in a catabolic state. So gets into the science behind it, but training protein minus protein breakdown equals net protein gain versus, getting enough stimulating the muscle, getting some amino acids, not having effect on fat or keto post-workout, the insulin levels. So something to look at is carb timing. So it depends on the intensity. If you're doing more explosive workout than the typical endurance athlete is going low heart rate, going longer and doing some strength training. So you might not be the person that needs to add something, but just experiment and learn more. So check that out. Good infographic they have, chasing ketosis, the downside of CKD and TKD, targeted cyclical or targeted ketogenic diet. So too much protein, too little protein, too much fat, too little fat, too much carbs, too little. So really looking at what is your goal? What do you want to achieve? Are you trying to lose weight? Let's really personalize that nutrition program so you can figure out, do you need to be ketogenic? Do you need to just be burning fat? Do you need to improve your carb metabolism? Are your digestive enzymes not working? Do you have inflammation in your body? Do you have poor fat metabolism? So it's not just switching to a low carb diet. Sometimes it backfires for people. Sometimes people are eating way too much fat. So looking at, actually, it's right in front of me, the chronic kidney disease or hypercholesterolemia, if you have different genetics, that you might be better on a low carb Mediterranean ketogenic diet. And that's what we do a lot for athletes, is maybe they can't do all that saturated fat. So really important to look at your genetics. So another article to look at. And then lastly, I found that they also had ruleme.com or rule.me, comprehensive guide to bodybuilding ketogenic diet. If you're into that, I'm into building my muscles up, but that was a great article to look at. Is it necessary protein timing? And actually that's just been busted, that you don't need to eat your protein. You can have it throughout the day. It's more important to get that 40 grams of protein throughout the day, and really looking at intermittent fasting when appropriate, and increasing your growth hormone, recovery, fat burning, and ketones levels when appropriate. Again, females are different. So get information on here, another little blog post to look at. So just some thoughts today as I was looking through some articles, trying to get some info together, see what people are saying and some guidelines. But let me know what your thoughts are on how you are a fat adapted keto athlete. Are you timing carbs before or after workouts, during workouts? What type of workouts require some extra carbohydrates, or maybe not? I know some people say they do well fasted, but I think more of that population are the male athletes. So remember to experiment, and you are different than your training friends. So let's personalize that nutrition, fueling, and performance schedule, and matching it all together. And the females matching it to their hormones. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you.